people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
To the mother relay, we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. An interesting super bantamweight contest that I came across set to go down in April for what is the super bantamweight EBU title, the newly vacated title. Spain's own Tania Alvarez will be taking on Italy's own Maria Cecchi.
For the EBU title at 122.
122, super bantamweight, that's where Ellie Scottney holds the IBF title. That's where Yamilet Mercado holds the WBC. Sigaline Lafarve, she's got the WBO, and Erica Cruz, she's got the WBA. That's where this contest is taking place. Between Tania Alvarez and Maria Cecchi, Tania Alvarez, you might be familiar with that name. That's the same Tania Alvarez that boxed Sky Nicholson on the DAZN platform, suffered her first professional loss. Maria Cecchi, that's the same Maria Cecchi that dropped a decision to Laura Grizeb and dropped a decision to Mary Romero.
Now they're going to be boxing each other for the EBU title at super bantamweight.
Both fighters show some ability, though are still raw and rough around the edges. Tania Alvarez is best described as a mid-range to inside pressure fighter, volume puncher, close quarters fighter, whereas Maria Cecchi,
she's a boxer puncher.
she is a little bit more fluid than Tania Alvarez. Stylistically, Maria Cecchi should have the stylistic advantage, but Tania will have home field advantage. This fight is set to go down in Spain.
It's Tania's neck of the woods.
Tania Alvarez, who sports a professional record of 10 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 2 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 11 professional bouts. As stated, that lone defeat came at the hands of Australia's own Sky Nicholson. And while Tania did lose the fight, she also managed to expose some of the deficiencies and weaknesses in Sky Nicholson.
A pure boxer.
Whereas Tania's a pressure fighter, albeit a very crude pressure fighter, rough around the edges, still a cut below Sky Nicholson. About to see how she stacks up against Maria Cecchi, who sports a professional record of 10 wins with 2 losses, no draws, 2 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 12 professional bouts.
And she's rough around the edges too. I remember how she looked opposite the ring Spain's own Mary Romero, yet another pressure fighter from that region. Maria looked awful. She looked awful with Mary Romero, though she actually looked all right with Poland's own Laura Grizeb.
Even though she lost that one too, she lost them both. She has since rebounded off that loss, and her handlers seem to do a very good job of keeping her busy and keeping her active. She fought 3 times in 2022, 3 more times in 2023.
Albeit against pedestrian level competition, but you got to work with what you've got.
That's what she's doing, and she's currently on a 2-fight winning streak, coming off a split decision win over Carla Merida back in November of last year. She's going to be facing Tania.
Tania Alvarez has been busy too.
Tania Alvarez fought 5 times in 2022, 4 times in 2023.
Albeit against pedestrian level competition.
The stylistic advantage has to go to Maria Cecchi, but home field advantage goes to Tania Alvarez, which is a big part of what makes the fight intriguing.
They're both limited.
They're not yet finished products, either of them.
They're still developing.
I've seen Tania Alvarez once or twice since the Sky Nicholson fight, and I will say that she is showing gradual signs of improvement. Tighter hooks, tighter punches, better defense, catching and shooting out of the high guard.
It's a great weapon for a pressure fighter.
So often pressure fighters are dismissed as not being defensively sound or defensively minded, when their defense is going to look different than, say, a pure boxer, a fighter who's moving away from the pocket. A pressure fighter moves toward it. And a high guard, catching and shooting out of the high guard, that's a great weapon for a pressure fighter.
Yeah, but you said Maria Cecchi's a boxer puncher. Don't boxer punchers have a tactical edge over pressure fighters?
Yeah, when they're on the level. That's the question. Is Maria Cecchi on the level? The last time we saw her against a mid-range to inside pressure fighter, she couldn't handle the pressure.
When was that?
Mary Romero, Tania Alvarez's countrywoman. Mary Romero of Spain, a pressure fighter. When Maria Cecchi shared the ring with her, she looked awful.
was 4 fights ago.
The tactical edge that boxer punchers have over pressure fighters is they have the right balance of both offense and defense, knowing when to assert yourself and stand your ground, and knowing when to create space, to let punches go, to walk the opponent into punches.
It's about balance.
What Maria Cecchi seems to struggle with is when the opponent crowds the pocket. When they actually do get inside, she seems a bit flustered. That's how she was with Mary Romero. She's fought 4 times since then.
She's looked better.
But if nothing else, you know that Tania Alvarez, like Mary Romero 4 fights before, she's gonna come inside. She's gonna crowd the pocket. So how will Maria Cecchi handle it?
I don't have a horse in the race. That's what makes it so intriguing. Either girl could beat either girl for different reasons.
Maria Cecchi has the right style for the job, but is she developed enough that she can win the fight and win the fight in hostile territory? Tania Alvarez, whilst having home field advantage, will that be enough to secure her the W against a moving target, a fighter who can move around and create space? Because the last time we saw her against a mover, Sky Nicholson, she lost.
Very intriguing fight.
Set to go down in April, and we'll talk more about it as the fight date approaches. Then super featherweight news, reigning IBF champion Joe Cordina is ready to vacate his IBF title if a unification can't be agreed to next. Speaking to the BBC, Cordina discussed his frustration of having to wait for May 18th to finally return, following his successful title defense in November in Monte Carlo against Edward Vasquez. It's tough when a fight falls through. It was a nightmare, Cordina told BBC Radio, Wales Sport. I am plodding along. Obviously, I'm disappointed that my fight in Saudi was called off due to Tyson Fury's injury. I am trying to keep busy, keep my mind occupied, and stop myself from veering off and eating rubbish. It's a bit of a kick in the shins. Now I have to do a horrible camp again. I've already done a camp. This was a good one, the best sparring, and now we have to reset and go again.
It's been rough for him.
He's been through some things. You have to remember, he first became IBF champion when he knocked out then champion of Japan, Kenichi Ogawa. But he hurt his hand in the process, had to have it worked on, and the IBF so chose to strip him
Because he couldn't satisfy his mandatory due to the injury.
He comes back, he fights Shavkat Rakhimov for that same IBF title. Rakhimov won the vacant title in the Zelfa Barrett fight.
After the IBF stripped Joe.
Joe beats Rakhimov, becomes IBF champion again, becomes IBF champion at the same weight for the second time. Anthony Kakase is a bit of a frustrating fight for me, even though I am getting paid very well. Kakase is a good fight, but it's not the fight people probably wanted or expected, Cordina explained. But I am grateful to be in the position where I'll be on a massive show, one of the biggest in history. I was chasing the other title holders, but it hasn't happened yet. The thing is, if I can't get a unification fight in my next fight, I will look to go up in weight. I'm not getting any younger, and the big money fights are the weight above me. Kakase is a great fighter, but if I beat him and don't get a unification fight, I don't want to just keep defending my title.
Here's a problem.
Joe Cordina's with Matchroom, right?
Right.
And if Joe Cordina were to move up from 130 up to 135, Top Rank has the run of the place. 3 of the 4 titles are over there at Top Rank. So while there are bigger names at 135, how many of them would he have access to?
Shakur Stevenson's got the WBC.
Emmanuel Navarrete and Denis Perenchik are set to fight for the vacant WBO, and Vasyl Lomachenko and George Kambosos are set to fight for the vacant IBF. The only other title at the weight is held by Gervonta Davis. And what are the odds that Joe's going to get access to him?
0.
So he can talk about moving up if he doesn't get a unification match, and he can talk about how there are bigger names upstairs at 135, but how many of them would he have access to?
Then what's the play?
The alternative? Pursue a Lamont Roach fight. Lamont Roach, WBA champion, right there at 130, who to my knowledge is a free agent.
So WBC and WBO titles, they're at Top Rank.
O'Shaquie Foster's got the WBC and the WBO title. Oscar Valdez and Liam Wilson, they're set to fight for that.
Whereas Lamont Roach, he's not a Top Rank fighter.
Maybe Eddie Hearn needs to get him on the horn, get him on the phone, make him an offer that he can't refuse.
He's eyeing an O'Shaquie Foster fight.
So time for Joe Cordina, time for Eddie Hearn is of the essence. The window of opportunity to make a fight between Joe and Lamont, that window is closing. They need to move fast.
As Lamont Roach says, no more talking to Foster.
O'Shaquie Foster, who successfully defended his WBC title not but a little over a week ago opposite the ring Abraham Nova, after the fight, after O'Shaquie won, him and Lamont had a back and forth. After the fight, Foster was cordial in calling out Roach, and the two then began to have a heated exchange on the social media app X that amplified. Foster is the WBC champion. Roach holds a WBA title. A fight between the two throwback fighters would signal a unification match. Remember, I called him out first. Roach Jr. told BoxingScene.com. Roach Jr. won the world title in his last fight, earning a split decision over Hector Luis Garcia, then champion. That fight happened in November of last year, and Roach Jr. has yet to announce a fight date since his last outing, but alluded to Foster being potentially next.
I ain't got nothing against Lamont Roach, but I think that both O'Shaquie Foster and Joe Cordina beat him. I do. It's just a question of who gets him in the ring, who gets to him first.
Think about it this way. Even if O'Shaquie Foster versus Lamont Roach doesn't happen and they don't make it, O'Shaquie still has the winner of Oscar Valdez versus Liam Wilson right there at Top Rank. They could do a unification match for the WBC and WBO titles.
They could.
But Joe Cordina, he don't have access to them. He ain't got access to O'Shaquie Foster. He ain't got access to the winner of Valdez versus Wilson. So his best bet to unify is Lamont Roach, and they need to get moving.
Because Lamont is talking about fighting O'Shaquie.
It's talks of me fighting him right now, so if I don't get lowballed, I'm going to break his face, Roach went on. Roach, the 28-year-old from Upper Marlboro, Maryland, sent a stern message to Foster. He even believes that Foster might have trouble getting the CEO of Top Rank, Bob Arum, to answer his call after Friday's performance. No more talking, Roach added. He needs to call Bob, but he probably don't answer after that performance.
Do you think there's anything to what Lamont is saying?
Yeah, but not for the reasons that Lamont Roach might think. You see, the people at Top Rank already have 2 of the 4 belts on their side of things. They could kick out some cash to get Lamont to unify with O'Shaquie Foster. They could.
But depending on what he might want for the fight, they might decide it's not worth it.
Why spend those extra dollars on a fighter that isn't your fighter, a champion that isn't your champion, when you have 2 champions right there? Or you will. The winner of Oscar Valdez versus Liam Wilson. If Oscar wins, him versus O'Shaquie Foster is a bigger fight than O'Shaquie versus Lamont.
And if Liam wins?
If Liam wins, well, maybe you could do it in Australia. Maybe it's a bigger fight in Australia between Liam and O'Shaquie than O'Shaquie versus Lamont.
Saying Lamont ain't worth no money?
I'm saying that depending on what dollar amount Lamont wants for that fight, the people at Top Rank might decide it's more trouble than it's worth, and they already have 2 belts on their side.
Enter Joe Cordina. Enter Matchroom.
They can swoop in, make Lamont Roach an offer to have him unify titles with Joe Cordina, which would satisfy what it is Joe Cordina wants for after his next fight. It can happen, but like I said, Matchroom has to move fast. Men's super middleweight news. Jose Benavidez Sr. says he wants his son David to face the very dangerous Christian Mbilli, guy we've talked about here on the channel several times, climbing up those super middleweight ranks, while David himself, his name is more established, but he's headed up to light heavyweight in his next fight. Once he returns to the super middleweight division, his father and trainer, Jose Benavidez Sr., would welcome a showdown against undefeated Canadian-based Cameroonian French contender Christian Mbilli. Benavidez Sr. even billed the 28-year-old Mbilli with the same moniker as his sons when discussing the potential matchup. Mbilli, that fucking guy is a monster. He's an animal too, said Benavidez Sr. He looked great in his last fight against Rohan Murdoch in January. That's another guy we'd like to fight. That's a dangerous fighter right there. I consider him more dangerous than David Morrell. He has more experience and has climbed the ladder on his own. He's proven himself.
Do you have a preference?
No, I like either fight for David. If we're going to discuss the idea of those fights, just that proposition, I could go for Benavidez versus Morrell the same way as I could go for Benavidez versus Mbilli.
They're both good fights.
But whether or not I think they will happen is another question entirely. Do I think Jose is being genuine when he says these things, when he says that he would like for David to fight that guy? Do I believe him?
No.
Jose says he also wants to be in the mix to face the likes of Munguia and Berlanga. David looked spectacular in his last 2 fights in 2023, said Benavidez Sr. With those 2 fights, he proved that he does have talent and his IQ is good. He's a monster. I'm super happy where we are. If the fight with Canelo happens, good. If not, we have to stay active. We have to keep proving, and the opportunity will come sooner or later.
I'm not against what Jose is suggesting. I'm just saying that I don't believe him.
If he does end up going up to light heavyweight and facing Alexander Vojtic. How confident are you guys that he's going to come back down to fight guys like Christian Mbilli or David Morrell?
How confident are you?
In a situation like that, if you were going to come back down in weight for anyone, one would think that it's Canelo Alvarez, and Eddie Hearn is extending that olive branch. He's extending that invitation.
If you're calling out Benavidez, he's across the street. You could have been able to, when you had Canelo, why wasn't
Because the PBC don't want to work with anyone, and now they're fucked. Yeah. So you get to a situation where if I reached out to Benavidez, what the PBC do is they go, "We're only making that fight on the PBC." We'll give Benavidez the opportunity. And this is what people don't understand. They're not willing to let their guys go on another platform to take a chance to achieve greatness. It all has to happen with them only.
Why do you think that?
So how does Malcolm
Because that's just how it
capitalize on
operates.
what's going on with the PBC?
So what we do is we sign who we want to sign, to people who have the commercial value, not just guys because they've got a good name. Some of these guys, PBC have lost a lot of money on doing fights with those fighters. So you have to, the price has to be right, the business has to be right. But people like Benavidez, if we do manage to do a deal with Canelo Alvarez, we can do Munguia, we can do Berlanga, or if Benavidez wants to come and play, but it doesn't, when PBC do a deal, they only let you go and fight one of their fighters if you align yourself to PBC. What I wouldn't do to Benavidez is say, oh, you can fight Canelo Alvarez, but you've got to sign a 5-fight deal with Matchroom or DAZN. I just want to see a great fight. And Canelo Alvarez don't care about who's with who. He'll just say to me, this is what Canelo will say to me, Eddie, who am I fighting and how much?
But Eddie,
So when you think about what Eddie's saying, that the door's not closed for Canelo versus Benavidez. He's willing to do that fight. No strings attached, no multi-fight deal. It can happen.
Well, Jose is saying they want to pursue a Mbilli fight.
So like, are you a fucking moron or something? You would have to be to not establish communications, to not explore that idea, establish a dialogue, see what Eddie Hearn is talking about. Before you go worrying about Mbilli or anybody else beyond a Vojtic fight, see what this guy's talking about.
Yeah, I don't believe Jose anyway.
I feel like he's one of these guys that, you get a camera in front of him and he just starts saying things that he thinks people want to hear, even if they're things people don't believe.
Because I don't believe him.
Feels like they have to twist your arm to get you to fight David Morrell, who's only got like 10 professional fights, but you're telling me you want to fight a more seasoned guy in Mbilli. If you do come back down, I don't believe you. What I think you should do is stop doing interviews, stop wasting time, and get Eddie on the phone.
It's at least worth exploring.
What's the worst that could happen? The fight don't happen? You didn't think it was going to happen anyway. Hell, maybe with Eddie Hearn at the helm of promotion, the fight is even more likely to happen than when Al Heyman was at the helm.
Because he's got the money. Al Heyman doesn't.
Who knows? Maybe you could get your hands on some of that Saudi money as well. Time for big talk and empty promises. It is over. David needs to do something.
And he needs to do it now.